Friends often ask me, why do you live in Norfolk? It's so far from civilization, so rural, so remote. It must be simply awful. So I tell them, I live there because it's so far away from civilization, so rural, so remote. It's simply wonderful. You can tell it's a real hardship getting into the battle bus on a sunny autumn morning and getting ourselves out amongst it all for a walk. Anyway, it's not that backward. Look, this village has got its very own well. Walking in Norfolk is a true pleasure. Yes, I know that smart-ass playwright described it as terribly flat. There's a tourist development officer of my acquaintance to whom the mere mention of Noel Coward is absolute anathema. But if, like the urbane Mr. Coward, you assume that flat is synonymous with dull, then you are making a big mistake. And anyone who says this corner of England is haunted by a cold and constant wind is lying. Well, exaggerating. For me, the simple fact that you can potter about in a landscape studded with the finest medieval churches in England more than compensates for the absence of those ludicrously lumpy bits of landscape that are constantly spoiling the view up in the Lake District. Hills, who needs them? It's not a fashionable concept, but the beauty of the natural landscape can often be matched by the beauty of the built landscape. When we aren't churning out the crass commercial stuff like designing yet another stunning out-of-town supermarket or executing a daringly different new telephone kiosk, we can actually turn in some pretty amazing work. Medieval churches, they're places that delight the spirit rather than depress it. It's ironic, but the biggest multinational of all, the medieval church, knew all about keeping our eyes fixed on heaven. They knew just how to appeal to the spiritual side of our nature, even if they were consummately skilled at amassing oodles of material wealth along the way. But they were well aware of the joy and pleasure and pride that people found in beautiful churches. They built places that nourished people's souls. Now, the parish church at Ranworth is definitely Egon Rone recommended when it comes to spiritual sustenance, because this is the finest, most complete medieval rood screen in the entire country. A rare and vivid glimpse of the glories of the medieval church. A startling insight into the beauty we're capable of creating when we put our minds to it. Literally thousands of people come here every year to see this screen. Perhaps it reminds them that the good things in life don't have to be destroyed and devoured by greed. The dragon doesn't always win.
Who's this, Flora? Do you know? Not sure? What about this dragon down here, to give you a clue?
Yes, look.
St. George.
St. George, that's right, yes, yeah. Well, it's St. George, who's the patron saint of England, and who chops dragons' heads off. He just crept back into the calendar, Bryan.
Has he?
Yeah, the Pope.
That's right, the Pope kicked him out, didn't he, in the 60s, yeah.
The Church of England calendar, 23rd of April, I think.
That's right.
And he's very popular on painted screen.
So why was he so popular in medieval times?
Well, I think he's one of the 14 auxiliary saints who helps you get through the gate of heaven.
That's right, useful man to know.
Yeah. Yes, that's right, exactly.
Of course, in this part of Norfolk, auxiliary saints could be considered to be pretty much redundant. I mean, you'd have to step outside the church to find a little piece of heaven, because Phil's parish is in the heart of our newest national park, Broadland. This is a haunting place of wide water and endless sky, a precious and fragile wetland of exceptional beauty, a place where the creation of a finely adjusted balance between commercial and environmental needs is the only way of ensuring that we don't destroy one of the country's outstanding landscapes. Like so much else, the Broads have changed enormously this century. The wherries, which were once such a common sight, have all disappeared except for the Albion here. Slow and stately, quietly at one with the water and the wind, a constant reminder of how much we've lost. Luckily, the efforts of the Norfolk Wherry Trust has saved this priceless piece of our maritime heritage. What a shame it would be if the day should ever come when the Broads just weren't worth sailing on.
Would you like to come aboard and film us, said the skipper of the Albion. Oh yeah, not half, says I. It'll cost you, says he. No such thing as a free lunch, is there?
Ah, how wrong I was. What he didn't mention was that the Albion's crew was on its way to sink a few pints of good old Norfolk beer by way of a little celebration. And the cause of such celebratory intent? Well, Woodford's, a thatched and deceptively bucolic little brewery set in the heart of the Norfolk Broads, had just won CAMRA's Champion Beer of Britain award. And the name of Mr. David Winter's award-winning Broadland brew was, in the circumstances, a singularly appropriate one. Norfolk Wherry, what else? And so, just to be sociable, I went along with them and had a few pints myself.
Go left, Jamie.
Understand?
All right. Got a good, Norfolk Wildlife Trust has a conservation centre here at Ranworth, and it's exactly what you'd expect from the oldest and biggest wildlife trust in the country. They know precisely how vital it is to teach the enormous numbers of people who holiday on the Broads just how they can avoid damaging the very thing they've come here to enjoy. They've got it down to a fine art. That's why this rather superb setup is entirely free of charge. The idea is to entertain and educate visitors, to let them see for themselves how much this area depends on their goodwill and common sense. Where such a priceless inheritance is at risk, we need to tread very carefully if we want it to be there for our children. The Trust only allow its own boats onto Ranworth Broad, and even they're electric. That means you get two things you don't usually get anywhere else. A Broad that's not polluted by the appalling thump-thump of diesel-engined pleasure craft, and wild birds in their hundreds. Now, you might remember I said the medieval church wasn't at all shy about making money. Well, that's how the Broads got here in the first place. They're the flooded and abandoned peat quarries of medieval monasteries, who ruthlessly exploited and despoiled the landscape for huge profits. So is that where we came in? Well, they didn't know any better.
Please, Daddy, can I have them binoculars?
Yeah, there you are, mate. What are you looking at?
The bird.
What is it, though?
I don't know.